Craziest NBA offseason ever? Maybe, but for the Pelicans, patience is key. I'll tell you why in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Friday, final show of the week here, and we got a lot to cover. Is it going to be the craziest offseason ever in the NBA? Well, answer that question and the Pelicans' role in that, because they're going to be involved in this, and I'll tell you why, but also why they need to be a little bit patient. Then we're going to look at a mock draft consensus. Who do the experts, the draft experts, have the Pelicans taking with the 7th overall pick? And then I'm going to tell you why it's going to be a key season for Herb Jones coming up that should get some really good play out of him. We got a lot to cover in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast, and let me know in the comments down below if you are an everydayer. So let's get into it. Craziest offseason ever. That is what Shams Charania of ESPN said on the Pat McAfee show the other day. He said, quote, "I think this might be the most craziest ever offseason because I think what you have right now is the parity of the league. It's so thin right now as far as the lineup. You could win a championship or you might be falling into the lottery. And I think the ability to go out there and improve your team and get to the championship level, I think that's on the minds of everyone around the league." Honestly, it's pretty true. I agree with that. But the craziest offseason ever. We're expecting a ton of activity, right? We're expecting a potential Giannis trade from the Milwaukee Bucks. Kevin Durant's certainly going to be moved at the NBA trade deadline. Boston's going to need to do something, right? That's just some of the big names that are going to be moving around the league this offseason. And there could be more. So expect a lot of changes. And frankly, I expect the Pelicans to be part of this for one reason here, and that's the hiring of Joe Dumars. And truthfully, it's less about Joe Dumars and his track record and what he does and, what he has done, and more to do with firing David Griffin, let's say. If you're firing David Griffin just to run this whole team back and be like, well, hopefully we have health, and hopefully our executive vice president of basketball operations can get through to Zion Williamson, then things will be different. That's not going to be the change. You may as well have just kept David Griffin. Look, Joe Dumars is not hanging out with Zion Williamson on a day-to-day basis, right? Joe Dumars is busy doing a million other things for this team. He's not going to be there to constantly be in the ear of Zion Williamson. So that whole idea of can Joe Dumars get through to Zion, while important, don't get me wrong, I think can also be a little bit overrated too. Right? Zion is who he is. That change that's going to happen from him, if it's going to happen from him, is going to be an internal thing where he just doesn't like how his career has been going and he wants it to be better. And admittedly, we saw some of that this past season where he was committed on the defensive side of the ball in a way that we never had seen from him before. All of that is highly encouraging, but this is also still the Zion that showed up out of shape to start the season. So if you're going to just run it all back, save the money, right? They're paying, I can tell you this, paying Joe Dumars more than they were paying David Griffin. So if you're going to do that, you have the guy make some bigger changes. And I think that's a lot of probably why they decided to make this decision of just how it's been going. We can't keep doing this. We need to do something different. And to me, that means big roster changes. When I look at this roster, particularly with the injury to DeJounte Murray, and look, he's not dead, right? It's not like he lost his leg. He's going to play basketball again, and he'll be a good basketball player. But with that injury, there is, in my opinion, very much a cap on how good this team can be. It can be an 8th seed, maybe a 6th seed if health goes really, really well for them. That's not tremendous, right? Like, I don't view them as a title contender. So if that's going to be the case and you want to kind of be in there because that line between being in the lottery or not is razor thin, then I do think you need to maybe make bigger changes to the team. And the Pelicans are going to be in position to do that. In a Kevin Durant deal, in a Giannis deal, whatever it might be, you're going to have the ability to kind of be that third team or fourth team or fifth team even in some of these trades. You know, New Orleans has assets that are appealing, whether it's, you know, a player or, you know, those Milwaukee Bucks kind of draft control that they have here. All of that can be valuable, or a big expiring deal for a guy that still can contribute in CJ McCollum. Now, the Pelicans are going to need to exercise patience here and fans are going to need to exercise patience too. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. That they're not going to get Kevin Durant. I saw a Kevin Durant trade floated out there. Like, I'm not even going to put it in the headline. Maybe I will. We'll see. Of like, could the Pelicans land Kevin Durant? It's not happening, right? Even if that trade is kind of interesting, it's likely not going to happen here. So if that's going to be the case, you're going to need to kind of either be the third or fourth or fifth party involved in those deals, or wait till some of that dust settles and then be able to start making moves. Teams that missed out on their first choice, if you wanted Kevin Durant but you couldn't get him, can you then maybe make a deal with that team that missed out on him, right? Those are the type of moves. You're waiting for that second and third tier kind of thing for those opportunities to pop up for the Pelicans, because they're not going to be in the running for some of those top people here. And so they need to exercise some patience and not try and force things. So as we get closer to the draft, and likely most deals are going to get done under the league new year when we roll over to the new cap numbers. Those numbers, by the way, are what I shared yesterday for everything. That was all that cap primer I should have specified is on the new cap coming up, not this current season's cap. You can still get deals done under this season. Then in the new season, it changes and you still get deals done too. I don't think it's going to impact anything truthfully for New Orleans necessarily. So, you know, when you hit kind of July 1 and the league new year starts and the new cap numbers are official, that's when I think you'll see New Orleans start to get busy. So if you see them not doing anything and it does look like they're going to run it back, one, maybe they just do, right? Maybe there will be some more structural organizational changes to the New Orleans Pelicans. But, you know, I think when you look at the team as it is right now, they've got to do something. And if they do that, it's going to be a little bit later on, I think, and not immediate and right away. Even the DeJounte Murray trade came a little bit later, you know, right around the beginning of July 1 after the draft with everything for the Pelicans. And I think you could see a very similar thing happening this year as they kind of wait for the big things to fall. And then the Pelicans kind of get active and start doing more of what they want and reshaping this roster, even if it's smaller moves. And I think that's likely going to be how this offseason goes for New Orleans. But I'm not convinced it's going to be the craziest offseason ever. I have trouble seeing the Bucks actually trading Giannis, but I easily could be wrong with that. You know, I don't think Kevin Durant moving from the Suns is crazy to me when it's like, yeah, that's probably what should happen at this point in time. I don't see the Celtics trading Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown, so that's at least a very good thing. But we'll see. We'll see if that's going to end up happening or not. Could be a crazy offseason. I hope it is. It's going to be a lot of fun then just to kind of watch from the side and cover on the Locked On NBA show that I do. So coming up next, let's get into the draft. Consensus mock draft. Who do the experts have the Pelicans taking? We've kind of narrowed it down, really, in my opinion, to about 3-4 people here. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, you know what time it is. Playoff season means big performances and even bigger rewards, and Dash Pass is bringing the heat with a slam dunk deal for Dash Pass members during the 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called They Swoosh You Score. Anytime a player drops 50 or more points in a playoff game, Dash Pass members score a free 3-piece crispy tender combo from Wingstop the very next day. All you need to do is place an order of $20 or more, use the code WINGSTOP50 at checkout. That combo is yours. Crispy, delicious tenders, totally free. And that offer is valid from noon to midnight the day after the game. There are terms that apply. So if you look at all those delivery fees in the apps and things like that, and all of a sudden your order is like double, triple what it felt like it should be, and you thought, this shouldn't be like this. Cool. Dash Pass. You get $0 delivery fees and exclusive perks like this one. So think about how much you could save with Dash Pass. So here's the play. Sign up for Dash Pass to unlock this and more exclusive deals all season long. When any player scores 50 plus in a playoff game, Dash Pass members can grab a free 3-piece crispy tender combo from Wingstop the next day with a $20 order and code Wingstop50. That's Dash Pass, your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms apply. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. For your second listen today, check out the Locked On NBA Big Board Show. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'll get some more draft experts on the show in the near future too, as well, it's draft season. That's what we're going to do here. So let's switch gears to the NBA draft right now. And let's look at the consensus mock draft. So I'm pulling this from NBA.com, where they pull a consensus on the draft of looking at 10 other sites and kind of compiling things into 9. No, it's actually 10. It's 10 because they use 2 for a couple places. Cool. All right. 10 minimum mock drafts to see where guys are going to fall here in the NBA draft. So there's 2 ways that we're going to look at this. There's the most common pick. So of the 10 mocks it's 10 that they use, who is the most common picked player for the New Orleans Pelicans at 7? And then you can kind of do a consensus based on where guys are just getting picked in general by awarding points 1 through 14, 14 being the highest for the first overall pick, and what the kind of most common is then going to be for all of this. So the kind of consensus in terms of value. So let's go through this. For the Pelicans, theirs is a little bit interesting because it does feel like 5, 6, 7 is where things kind of open up. We kind of have an idea of who the first 4 guys are going to be. Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, then VJ Edgecombe, though there's one outlier with Ace Bailey in this, right? After that, so that's the order for the most common picks. Cooper Flagg is picked 10 out of 10. Dylan Harper is 10 out of 10. At number 3, Ace Bailey is picked 5 out of 10, which I think is interesting. 4 to the Hornets, VJ Edgecombe is 7 out of 10. For the Utah Jazz, Jeremiah Fears is taken 3 times. Trey Johnson is taken 3 times. That's tied for the most they have. The Wizards at 6, Trey Johnson is taken 4 times. That's their most common. For the 7, the Pelicans, Knuepple is taken 3 times. 8 to the Nets, Jeremiah Fears 4 times. 9, Raptors, Derek Queen 3 times. And then 10 is Kasparas Yakichonis at 3 times as well. We'll go to the top 10 there. So the most common pick for the Pelicans in these mock drafts is Knuepple. And, in our Locked On NBA mock draft after I traded Zion, I took Knuepple at 7 overall. It's just a solid player that's going to do some really good things, right? I've been seeing a few other comps for him that I like, one of them being Gordon Hayward, and that was a very good and valuable NBA player. Maybe not like the number 1 guy you want on a team, but certainly a guy that's going to help you win, put up really good numbers, and do a number of things for you. And Knuepple would fit on basically every team, I think. Of these guys that we're kind of looking at, he's probably like the safest of everybody, I think. Maybe not the highest ceiling, but certainly the safest. And, I'm trying to get our Locked On Duke host on to kind of talk about him a little bit more because I'm interested in what his ceiling could be. But I've talked to a couple draft people that were like, yeah, if they didn't have Cooper Flagg, Knuepple would have been the leading scorer on that team and would have been like an elite looking guy. And I think we'd be looking at him very differently. And in the games that Cooper Flagg missed, Knuepple really stepped up. You can see, in times in college, like 30-plus point games from him with how good he can be as a leading scorer on a very good Duke team. So while he might kind of not be like the sexy pick here, and I get that, he's going to be a very solid NBA player. And if you're drafting him at 7 while you have Zion Williamson, he's going to be good and he's going to be able to contribute and help you win. And I feel pretty confident in seeing that from him. So overall, Knuepple, right, is going to be a good pick. He shoots really well. He's very good as a pick and roll ball handler and making the correct decisions out of that. You need some of them. And for a team that's kind of lacking a point guard as of now, and if you listen to yesterday's show, the everydayers know, they don't have a ton of flexibility to go and make like free agency moves or things like that. We'll get into some more of that next week too. So just adding a guy that's going to shoot, space the court, and do some secondary ball handling for you in Knuepple with good size at 6'7" and a good age. He's a freshman. I don't know, that'll work for me. I think, even if it's not the most like exciting electric pick that you feel, but he's going to be a good player. Do not sleep on Knuepple. He might be the most like underrated of these top like 8 guys that we've been looking at here. So let's look at the top 14, and this is kind of a consensus big board in a sense, right? This is less of the fit and things like that, and fit doesn't really matter as much here. So here's their explanation for calculating this. Top 14 kind of as a consensus. So a consensus big board, let's call it. To calculate the consensus, we award 14 points for every mock draft in which a player went first overall, 13 for second, continuing to 1 point for the final lottery pick. The player with the highest point total represents the top overall selection. All right, that makes sense. Cooper Flagg's 1, Dylan Harper's 2, VJ Edgecombe is 3, Ace Bailey is 4, 5 is Trey Johnson. So if you're doing this as a mock, he's going to Utah. 6 is Knuepple. So he's kind of the consensus 6th best player here to the Washington Wizards. 7 is Jeremiah Fears. So you could kind of put him on New Orleans, and that makes sense, right? He's got a very good handle. He's exceptionally quick. He's going to be a lead guard that really breaks down a defense. I see a lot of Jamal Murray in him. I see some Scoot Henderson in there as well, and those type of point guards. He has a lot of that. It's a little bit undersized, I think, at times, but overall, he's the type of player that I think if he hits his ceiling is going to be really good, and he looks like he can be an offensive engine if he reaches his potential. There's a lot of buts in there when it comes to him. He's a little undersized. 6'4" is not bad, but that's in shoes. So kind of everyone's got shoes on, right? So Jeremiah Fears kind of the 7th best player. So you're looking at something like Trey Johnson, Knuepple, Jeremiah Fears there. Kevin Malawach is 8 for the, Derek Queen is 9, and then Kasparas Yakachonis is 10. I find it interesting that Kevin Malawach is at 8, but he was actually not one team's like most picked kind of guy, which is kind of interesting here. So let's look at some of the mock drafts here to kind of tell you where people are slotting in some of these players. So ESPN.com's has the Pelicans taking Kevin Malawach at 7. The Ringer has Jeremiah Fears going to the Pelicans at 7. The Athletic has Knuepple. Yahoo Sports has Jeremiah Fears. Bleacher Report is Kevin Malawach. That's 2 for him right there. NetScouts Basketball is Knuepple at 7. CBS Sports is 2. So the first one with Gary Parrish has Kasparas Yakachonis to New Orleans. I think that feels a little high, but who knows? He also has Ace Bailey going 5th, which I think is kind of interesting. CBS Sports Kyle Boons has Colin Murray Boyles for New Orleans. I like him as a player. I don't think I'd take him at 7, but I think he's a really interesting prospect. SB Nation, this one kind of blows my mind. Ace Bailey at 7. If he's there, even if I'm not the biggest Ace Bailey guy, I still think Ace Bailey is going to be really good, and I would draft him in a second at 7 overall. USA Today has Knuepple at 7 for the Pelicans. So that's kind of your consensus mock draft. I'll keep monitoring this as things kind of change and as more workouts start to come through, and see how we can read the tea leaves a little bit for what the Pelicans are going to do in the NBA draft. So coming up next, I want to talk about Herb Jones a little bit. He's extension eligible. Did you know that? What would that look like a little bit? But more importantly, should the Pelicans extend him? That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. Listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below for your second listen. What is going to be the QB situation for the New Orleans Saints. Locked On Saints, make them your second listen today, covering the QB battle right now. Is it Rattler? Is it the rookie? Ross Jackson's breaking it all down over at the Locked On Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm hanging out with Ross tonight. We're going to go out and grab some drinks. It's going to be awesome. Love the dude. So go make Locked On Saints your second listen today. All right, let's switch gears to Herb Jones for a moment here. Herb Jones is extension eligible for the New Orleans Pelicans. And after what was a disappointing year because of injury more so than anything else, I think his future is not quite up in the air, right? Like, he's an established NBA player. He's going to get a new contract, and he is good. But the shooting was down last year from the previous high of above 40% the year before, just 30.6%. Now, he only played 20 games for the Pelicans, so that's a big factor into into this. He just wasn't healthy. But the numbers kind of went backwards. Per 36 minutes, he went from 13 points per game to 11.4. The three-point shooting really, really dropped, and that wasn't great. But overall, everything else was about the same. The blocks per game were down, but again, it's a very small sample size for everything. But he's still good. But how much is he worth, and should the Pelicans extend him? So let's get this out of the way. The Pelicans absolutely should extend Herb Jones if you can. I am about as big of a Herb Jones fan as possible. I bought a new City Edition jersey this year. That was the Herb Jones jersey. That is the only one I wanted to buy this year. I love it. I wore it all throughout Mardi Gras, actually. This year he's going to be making $14 million, and it basically jumps to $15 million the year after that. So you could add on an additional 3 years to his deal. If you can do that, you should just do it. Herb Jones is that good. Is he a $30 million guy? No. Is he a $25 million guy? No, not necessarily. But is he worth somewhere between 15 and 20 million per season minimum? I think 1,000%. So if you can get him at 20 million a year with the way the salary cap is rising 10% every single year, you're going to start seeing some real big sticker shock when it comes to some of the players out there. You're going to see guys making 60, 70, even $80 million a year. We're not that far away from $100 million per season NBA players. That is a wild number to think about, right? But that's coming up in the nearish future in this league. Herb Jones at $20 million a year, even 25. Now, Trey Murphy III's making 25 a year. I don't know if Herb Jones is quite worth that because of the lack of offense or inconsistent offense at times. So, maybe Herb, if they offer him $20 million a year, doesn't take that and instead thinks he can get a higher payout. That doesn't strike me as Herb Jones and his mentality. But this could be a big year where Herb bets on himself by not signing an extension, knowing you have 2 more years on this deal. You're still extension eligible after this season. If he has a big breakout offensive season, goes back to shooting 40%, scores whatever he's going to score, those are the type of numbers that can really earn him big money with how good he is as a defender. One of the best perimeter defenders in the league is evidenced by last season, right? When he finished 5th in Defensive Player of the Year voting and was first team all defense. He's that good of a defender. He just does everything you want from him on that side of the ball. He doesn't complain. He's just like a workaholic when it comes to the game. I love all of that from him. He's the type of player that every team wants. Every single team wants Herb Jones on there. They all want Trey Murphy too. But Herb Jones is a guy that would get a massive payday by somebody in the NBA. Somebody will pay him not a max, but a lot of money to come to them. So if he has that big offensive season, he's in line for a big payday. So it's in the best interest for the Pelicans to try and extend him now and just lock him down and do your best to basically make, the first 10 years of his career here in New Orleans. I would be all for that. They're going to need to think about the salary cap in the future and going forward. I've explained that to y'all, at depth, that I am mildly concerned about that, not just next season, but the year after that too, depending on what you do with CJ McCollum. So you need to figure all of that out, but extending Herb Jones would be a smart thing. But Herb might be smart to not take any sort of extension, bet on himself, knowing that at a minimum, he's a $15 to $20 million player. Even with bad offense, right? I don't think his number's going down at all. That's how impactful he is as a defender. So I'm a big Herb Jones fan. I know the Pelicans are big Herb Jones fans. I'm sure you're a big Herb Jones fan too. Let's hope Herb stays here in New Orleans. I'll have to rock the jersey on a show one day. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. I appreciate y'all so much for listening. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I appreciate y'all listening. I'll be back with y'all next time.